think it was kind of near the Uluru. It wasn't, because Uluru you're not allowed to camp, obviously, near. You have to be in a campsite there. But kind of on the way there, I just pitched up like in the bush, and the stars were just insane. The sunset was incredible, and I was just like, I've got this right. Like, I'm doing my life right. This is what I want to remember.
Welcome to the Seek Travel Ride podcast, where we share the stories and experiences of people who have undertaken amazing adventures by bike. Whether it's crossing state borders, mountain ranges, countries or continents, we want to share that spirit of adventuring on two wheels with our listeners.
Hello, I'm your host Bella Malloy, and I'm very excited to introduce my guest for today's episode of Seek Travel Ride, Claire Wyatt. Now, I last caught up for a chat with Claire just over 6 months ago. At that stage, she was in North Queensland and about a third of her way through a phenomenal cycle tour of Australia. We'd agreed at the time to get together again once her trip was complete, and so here we are now. I'm especially looking forward to finding out how the rest of Claire's bicycle tour went, as it is safe to say that the toughest and most remote sections lay ahead of her as she made her way across to the Northern Territory, down through South Australia, and then making the turn along the Nullabor Plain to her end destination of Perth, Western Australia. The summary of just a few sentences cannot ever do justice to the complexities contained within this route. So it's time to ask some more questions and get into the details of Claire's Australian adventure. Claire, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Bella. So nice to speak to you after it's all done. This is the first podcast after the whole trip, so it's really cool to be able to share it with you.
First and foremost, I know I speak on behalf of all my show's listeners who's sending you a mega mammoth congratulations, Claire. Reading back through that intro, talking about 6.5 months ago you were in North Queensland. The way that you made your way and travelled through so many more 10,000 kilometres, I think, potentially since we last spoke.
Yeah.
But it's not 10,000 kilometres of any normal cycle tour. 10,000 kilometres of remote, isolated outback Australia with every single thing that Mother Nature could throw at you in between as well. It's fair to say super excited about this show, Claire.
Cool. Thank you so much. Thank you, Bella. Yeah, it went really quickly. Like, we obviously had that first podcast back when I was in, Atherton and the Tablelands. And then it was just like, go, go, go. And it was, the timing was on. I think I booked my flights home. So I knew that I had a date in mind. So then it was get to Darwin, down the middle, all of it. It just happened really quickly.
And again, that summary, get to Darwin, down the middle. And there's so much that it's not like you're playing video games here and saying, today you will progress another 95 kilometres on a dead straight flat road. There's so much that goes into this. But Claire, as you know, and you have been a listener to the show, I always start my show with the same question. But I've asked this question to you already, so I'm going to ask a question with a twist. And that is, do you remember the very first touring bike you rode, as in the bike that you rode for your very first tour?
Yeah, that was a bike that I got when I was working in Cambodia. So I basically got made redundant, and then they gave me a Cannondale. I said, can I have the Cannondale touring bike in the back? And I also borrowed panniers, and that's my first trip I did solo around Cambodia. So yeah, it was in my redundancy package because COVID, everything was up in the air. So I said, don't pay me, but can I use that touring bike? Yeah, it was good.
You couldn't have known at the time just what little bit of adventure you were unlocking, that adventure mode fully unlocked in you to just pursue a different type of lifestyle. But am I right to say that that bike's a bit extra special, and is that potentially making its way back to you now?
Oh, that's a different one. That was...
We need to go down this rabbit hole.
Yes. So no, the special one was the one I took to Costa Rica and Nicaragua. So I bought that off Facebook Marketplace here in London for I think it was £300 maximum. It was a Boardman, blue and pink. I loved the colour, and took it out to Costa Rica and Nicaragua and just absolutely rode it to shreds. It just it wasn't a bike for what I was doing. So I knew that I could leave it there. It wasn't like I'd spent thousands of pounds on it. It was a really good bike. I left it with a warm showers host that looked after me. He really liked the colour of it. So I said, well, when I'm finished, you can have it. So that was a cool part of the story. And then, I was scrolling on Instagram the other day and I saw it for sale on a page that I must have followed. I was like, hey, that's my bike in Costa Rica. So it turns out someone had stayed with the Warm Showers host and needed to buy a bike. So they bought the bike off him. They cycled it around Costa Rica and then they were selling it. So it's quite a cool story that I then see it online and I was like, I need to get that home.
Has the sale been made? Is that bike somehow going to make its way back to you in the UK?
We're basically working out the delivery fees and if we can do it and it's not a ridiculous price, I'd love to get it back, but it might end up being more than I paid for. So we'll see. It'd be a dream to get it back. It'd be really cool.
You know what would make this story complete is if we could find someone in Costa Rica that's keen to cycle tour over towards the UK and get it to you back via cycle tour. And then maybe this bike just perpetually lives on as a cycle touring bike. Yeah. It's like paid forward to the next cycle tourist and let's see if we can get this bike around the world. That would be mad and hilarious.
It would be so good. I don't know how it's still going. It was pretty dead when I left it. It needed a big service. But good on, I'm really pleased that it's been used again.
That bike, Claire, obviously needs a big service, but I could only imagine the bike that you used for Australia, it would have been in need of a service by the end of it, but so would you.
Yeah, definitely. So the bike did so well at the end because I was getting through. I think I put it on Instagram that the back tyre was nearly bare and I hadn't realised, and my body was getting battered by the headwinds. So I was kind of forgetting about how the bike was. And then my bike was really, really not in a good way by the end of Australia. And then when I got home, I crashed as you do, because I was physically just I was finished. It was a relief to finish, but I didn't realise how long it takes to recover. It's taken still now, I would say I'm still recovering a couple of months after. Because in June, I didn't have a day off. So I had 31 days and, completely on the bike and without a day's rest.
Yeah, and we're talking about probably averaging 8, 9, 10 hours a day, possibly even more on some of those atrocious headwind days, and covering some vast distances. I'm trying to think of the longest distance that you cycled on a day.
190k but I had a tailwind that day because I remember there was nothing in between. So it's right, I've got to give this a go. If not, I'll just camp in the bush. But I was like, it'll be so good to get a burger at the end of that 190. It was literally you're in the middle of nowhere, but at the end there's a gas station that had a restaurant. So I was like, if I can make that 190, I can have a burger, essentially.
You would have deserved 2 burgers. The weird thing is when you do a massive bike day like that, I don't know about you, but personally, I often find it really, it's mentally I want a massive meal. But physically, it's I'm incapable of eating large amounts. I have to eat small portions at a time. Were you a bit the same, or did you just inhale that burger? And what flavour was it?
You Australians love everything in your burger, beetroot, eggs, pineapple, all of it. I'd always just got the one that was called the lot.
Absolutely, that's the way to go.
Yes, but no, essentially no. I remember in the heat I had trouble eating. And sadly, sometimes it made me unwell on the bike. So you just so hot and then you eat. And sometimes that didn't mix well. But no, most of the time I could eat a lot.
Knowing I was recording this episode with you, I've scrolled back through your Instagram stories and everything to see. And I don't know if it's evident to you, but as your trip progresses on, you sort of become smaller and smaller in every frame. Your body just physically changed as well with this trip.
Yeah, my family and friends were pretty shocked when I got home. I was 20 kilograms down from the start. So yeah, it was definitely the last month or two I was very intense and I pushed my body to the limit. So yeah, I did lose a hell of a lot. Back in London drinking a few beers and it's back on already, but it's quite shocking how quick you can I just couldn't eat enough for what I was doing.
What about your cycling tan lines? They were pretty extreme as well. Have they sort of faded away now with a beautiful proper UK summer, or?
We haven't had a summer here. They're still there, which I like because it's a reminder every day. I'm oh yeah, you did that cool thing.
Claire, for the benefit of those people who haven't listened to our episode together, part 1, which my listeners, I believe it was episode number 14. If you scroll right back through, you should find it. But could you just give a really quick summary of what this Australia tour, what your route looked like? And as you said, you were in Atherton Tablelands when we caught up. You were having, I think it was about a 3-week maybe rest off the bike before setting off for the rest of it. But what did the rest of that look like?
Sure. So we spoke before, but I started in Tasmania and then took the ferry over to Melbourne and made my way all the way up the east coast, right up to the Daintree. And then I came back a little and rested in Atherton. Essentially, when I got to Atherton, there was still a lot of flooding on the Savannah Way. So I was like, I basically got up to Atherton quickly, which was good. But yeah, I had to wait for 3 weeks, which was nice for my body to recover a little bit. And then I headed over the Savannah Way to Corumba. And then I was going to carry on the Savannah Way, but it was closed. So I had to detour back down to Cloncurry on like a 500k detour with not much. Then I headed across the Berkeley Highway to the Three Ways, which essentially is the road that then you turn up to Darwin. So then got to Darwin and then headed straight down the middle of Australia and went out to Uluru and then straight down to South Australia and then turned to the Nullabor and headed to Perth.
Wow.
Essentially, that's the route.
When all was said and done, what was the final kilometre tally in the end?
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Hi everyone, it's me, Bella from the show. I just wanted to let you know about something exciting. I have recently just created a new Facebook group named Seek Travel Ride, where if you are a fan of the show, you can join and we can actually bring this community more to life. It's a place where you can learn more about our guests, see more photos, chat about episodes in more detail, and maybe even pose some questions as well. It's also a place where you can share your own bicycle adventure journeys. Whether you've got a photo or a blog or some videos that you want to share, come online, say hi, join the Facebook group, and let's enjoy this community that we have built. We have a global audience here. People are listening from all around the world, and I think we can only thrive and get an even greater sense of wanderlust by sharing our experiences with each other and connecting. So get onto Facebook. I've provided a link in the show notes and you can join that community as well. Thank you. Now back to the show.
You know what? And I don't know why, but I'm refusing to count. I don't know why. I just think it's just like, for me, I'm like, I don't need to put a figure on it, like an exact. I don't know why. It's a bit weird. And maybe it's because then if I count it, it's done. And I've still got a corner of Australia to do. So we'll see maybe.
That is quite a corner. Oh, my goodness. Yeah. If that is in your mind, I'm putting it out there. There's going to be a podcast number 3 if you're coming back to do that.
We're doing it.
So we're talking about the Kimberley up there.
Yeah.
That is no joke cycle touring country. Not that the rest of yours wasn't, because I think, and it's really fair to point this out, by no means are you the first person to bicycle tour across Australia. People do this. But what struck me as different, Claire, was that you purposefully took a route which was more isolated and more remote than the usual touring route.
Yeah.
When you were in Atherton waiting to set off, what was it like? You'd gotten up there, and do you think it's fair of me to say that the most remotest, hardest sections lay ahead of you at that point?
1,000%. Like, really, I had done nothing. Like, the easy bit was the East Coast, because you're in cities, you're in near shops, you're near bike mechanics. I was staying with people lots. So yeah, like the East Coast was hard. Well, I wouldn't say it was hard riding, because you have so much more comfort when you're near cities. And the riding was, except for Melbourne to Sydney, was very hilly, but then you're kind of Sydney all the way to Daintree was pretty flat and pretty chilled. Yeah, it was hot, so I had to deal with the 40 degrees up the East Coast. But yeah, no, I had no idea. If I remember sitting in Atherton Tablelands kind of panicking. I was like, right, this is the next leg, is like the Cairns to Darwin. I was speaking to more and more people and they were going, what? We're like, whoa, that's like a different level. So I didn't know how hard it would be or how isolating, but yeah, it's incredibly different to the East Coast.
Notwithstanding then also Mother Nature having a say in it as well, flooding detours you said you had a 500 kilometre detour?
Yeah, so when I got up to, it's Corumba, isn't it, up on the top? Yeah, Corumba. Yeah, and then you can go across the Savannah Way, which is very bumpy, very off-road. But I hadn't made my decision, and I said when I got there, I would decide. And I went past and the road was closed. So then I was like, right, well, that's closed. I didn't have to make the decision. Someone else did it for me, which was good. And I went back down to Cloncurry, which you have to take a big, long detour. That was a 5-day detour, and I sadly had headwind. That was my first lot of headwind. Yeah, so it was just incredible, and it was my first taste of the real outback because there was not much there at all.
Termite mounds? Was that where the termite mounds were?
Exactly, yeah, all those termite mounds, yeah. That was a difficult few days, but was a good introduction of what I had to come.
I know that it was actually a question someone sent me just not long after I posted your show up, and they said, how is Claire carrying all the water on her bike? How much water does she need to carry between services? For things like that, you obviously knew stuff like this was ahead of you and that you were hitting the remote sections, but it's one thing to know about it. How do you practically prepare for it, and what does that actually mean physically for you day to day on the road?
Yeah, so I had a really detailed spreadsheet where I had exactly where I could get water. So I had it all day by day, the kilometers that were coming up, then where the water stops were. So I knew I might have 3 days before I can collect water again. And so I just really had to logistically look ahead constantly. And I basically just had this spreadsheet that I would say was a massive, it motivated me, and it was just very helpful to have that spreadsheet to be like, right, there's a shop there, there's this there. And I didn't have to worry about it while I was cycling to look for it. I knew that there was one there. Looking back, I carried more than I needed. I always had a spare 7 litres. I never got too far. I think maybe one time I got low, but I knew I was reaching a town. But I always made sure I had one spare big bottle of water, big cylinder of water.
I must say, I'm nodding my head listening to you. It would be fair to describe me as someone who's potentially a little bit anxious. And I know that the anxious side of me would possibly, if I was tackling remote sections, that would be a worry. What if I run out of water? And especially because you started hitting the heat there and the brutal headwinds too.
Yeah.
Because it's one thing to sort of be on a spreadsheet, and it sounded super practical what you were doing. You were planning out your stops. But it's one thing then to think, okay, this is this many kilometres, this is how many litres I'll need a day. But then when those weather conditions come in, like a hot, brutal headwind, that's exasperating. And then you're managing other health issues, potentially thinking about heat stroke and stuff like that, which is quite dangerous. You always had backup water. You mentioned there was one time you nearly ran out, but was it ever in the back of your mind? Was it sort of preying in your mind? I'm worried of running out?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think I went so over the top to make sure I had more, I was okay. But yeah, of course you have to think, what if I didn't make it to that campsite for some reason? So when the headwinds would pick up, that would scare me, because I might have 120k planned, but it might be 3 o'clock and I've only done 40 or 60, let's say. So then I'm like, oh God, I've got to keep going harder. And then you need more water. So yeah, you just have to carry a lot. I also had a, what's the life straw? You can, if you really needed to, you could use it, suck water out of the puddle or riverbank or something. I didn't actually ever have to use it, but I had it spare. So yeah, but no, I mean, I have to say, I met somebody going the other way to me that had no water and no food, and it terrified me. I had to give him water and food. He was on a bike, and I was really scared for him, because I was like, I know you've got 7 days of not much. And I was like, I tried to explain to him, like, it's really remote that way. But he's done 4 years on the bike, so he obviously knows what he's doing, but it was scary.
Did he make it? Sorry, I'm like
No, he made it. He made it. I had a warm showers host who had him like a week later, and I was like, thank goodness, he was fine. But I think lots of people stopped and gave him water, or he would flag people down. So maybe his way was, instead of carrying all that weight, he would flag people down. But yeah, I was quite surprised.
Especially as someone that's so knowledgeable about that. I mean, look, he obviously made it.
He made it his side, yeah.
It wouldn't be the way I would do it. Certainly wasn't the way you did it, but, power to him.
Yeah.
When you were talking about the life straw, and God, doesn't it sound appetizing? You could suck the water out of a little muddy puddle. Were there actually many natural sort of water sources, if that was needed, that you could do that? Because there's two visions that I have of that part of Australia. One is red and dusty and remote and not much, and termite mounds. And the other one is beautiful water holes filled with crocodiles. I know you came across both scenarios. So were you actually in an area that, whilst it was remote between services, was it remote between even, water holes and water sources?
Yeah, I reckon so. Yeah, like you had, and it was really dry, even though there had been flood. It was very confusing, because I was getting told there was all this flooding, and then I was like, it's still so dry. And essentially I didn't go anywhere near the rivers because of the crocs. So I was just like, there's no chance that I'm going down there. I'd rather not drink water than go to the rivers.
I'm reflecting back, there was a classic photo that you had. Was it at a campsite that was with a lagoon or something? What was that sign? I'm trying to remember what the sign said.
He's saying like crocodiles come up, even up to the campsite. And I was like, so I've got to sleep in my tent tonight, knowing that there's crocs. And yeah, it was definitely like a no swimming, no. But then everyone else at the campsites were in their utes or trucks. So they were all right, but I was in my little tent. So I didn't sleep too well that night.
How appetizing does some tent nylon look?
Yeah, exactly.
I don't actually even know what noise they make.
No, I don't know. I don't want to know.
I know in our first recording we did talk about lovely Australian fauna and animal wildlife there as well, but this is something that I came across while you were doing your trip. It was one time you were camping and then all of a sudden you've got this video of your wild camp and it's just, your tent is filled with frogs. Beautiful green frogs, not toads, but frogs everywhere.
I went in to get some food and then I came back and like they were everywhere. They were just everywhere in my shoes. I'm not scared of frogs, so I was fine picking them up and moving them. But when I said it was probably like 25 that time, like all in my stuff, in my pockets of my shorts. Thankfully, I saw one in my pocket of my short, otherwise I'd be carrying them around.
Little Kermit.
Yeah, they were on my bike, they were on the handlebars, on my seat. I must have carried one. Like I was waiting for one to just jump out my pannier. Or yeah, there was a lot.
I've just got this image of a frog looking at you from like a handlebar feed bag or something, just like,
yeah.
Oh.
There was a sign that's like, where there's the frogs, there's the snakes. So you have to, and then so I was like, oh no. I only saw a few snakes in the whole trip. So I was pretty happy with that.
Actually, yeah, I mean, I'm here in France, but I actually, when I was riding with some friends here a week ago, accidentally ran over a snake. So
really?
They're not just in Australia, yeah, and it was one of those things that scared the bejesus out of me when it happened, as it does. Obviously, water is one thing, but food is also another thing that you're going to need to stock up on as well. How did you go from a feeding point of view? And I guess you can't not notice the extra water you're taking on. Every litre of water is a kilo of weight on your bike. But what about from a food perspective? And you wouldn't have been able to lift your bike up.
Yeah, my bike got really heavy. Like when I left Canada, I did a big supermarket stock, and just got everything. And my bags were just full to the brim. And then you're like, oh, I want to eat it all. But you're like, no, because you've got to ration this out. I got some awesome sponsors. To be honest, like I just wrote these really fluffy emails just saying what I was doing and got some some awesome one-off donations from like Grenade Bars, Backcountry Cuisine, the freeze-dried food, sponsored loads. So yeah, I got really lucky with that. So I had loads of food. I had lots of bars, lots of frozen dried food, but no, I didn't get enough. Like even thinking about like lunches, I was just having a can of tuna. I had about 20 cans of, well, more. I had loads of cans of tuna in my bag. And as we laugh about, I got so sick of tuna.
Will you ever eat another tin of tuna in your life? I've got that as a question.
I know, I saw that. I don't know why, but last week I was just obviously missing the road and I had Rivita and tuna. Like that's what I would have, Rivita and tuna. And I was like, why have I gone for this?
Oh, see, it's in your skin now. Part of you is Australian, Claire. I love it. Did you at least mix it up and get some different flavours?
Yeah, because I was going to say I'm really impressed with Australian tuna. You get them ready made with, like, you could have sweet chilli or corn ones. So we don't have that in England. It's kind of just your tuna.
I think there's like tomato and basil from memory, and lemon and peppercorn or something like that.
Yeah, the lemon pepper, I like that one.
Obviously, food, you can never eat enough on a trip. It's something that really struck me on my trips, and I've not done anything that would stack up against the distances that you've done there, but it's amazing just how much you need to eat and how much you can eat. And when you come to a stop, we were talking about, you'd lost 20 kilos over the course of this tour. We joke about you getting back into some healthier habits in London, social habits.
Yeah.
But did you find, even though you'd stopped, you were always still hungry?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, no, it wasn't like I was. Mum would say, "Oh, Claire, you look awful." I'm like, "Thanks, Mum." But it's like I am eating as much as I was eating regularly, all that I could, and that I felt like I wanted. But like we said, it's just 9 hours of exercise. You just can't really fathom how much you need to eat to balance that out. But no, I remember being kind of 3/4 of the way down the middle, looking in the mirror and going, "Oh my word, I need to I need to stock up on more food and just be better, because I kind of got used to just having breakfast, just having lunch and dinner, and not stopping as much in the mornings and things. So I was just making sure that every hour I'd have a bar or had something, because you get into a routine, don't you? But it was difficult. It was difficult to have enough, I would say.
Food and water is one thing when you're dealing with remote sections, but the other one is the thing that's so obvious, and that it's remote and it's isolated.
Yeah.
How did you deal with so many hours with just yourself as your own company?
Yeah.
And it's one of those things, when you're riding your bike on your own, it's not like you've got someone to chat with you, even in other areas. But when you're in that remoteness, you could go for ages without even seeing a truck or a car pass. So how did you cope with that? And what was that roller coaster like?
I really can't explain. Like, a lot of people have asked this to me, because I'm very social. I love people. I love talking to people, but I really didn't get lonely. And like I'm like, okay, that's good. So it means that I'm okay in my own company. I really enjoyed the solitude, I guess, and the just feeling of being that alone, because I knew I'm not going to get that again really in my life, to be that, hopefully, that alone. So yeah, I just had to. And I learned how to kind of empty my mind, I guess. So for hours, I'm not sure I was thinking too much. I think I was just pedaling and just, and then hours would have passed. I did listen to music and things, but also didn't want to become too dependent on entertainment. And because that's the one thing I could get in my head about. If like I'd had a whole day of listening to music and the next day I didn't, I'd find myself getting bored. So I tried to limit how much I listened, just to try to balance it, I guess.
That's interesting, because you're not the first guest that's mentioned something similar to me. I'm thinking actually back to another guest, Paul Detilly, and his technique, he had music as a last resort. If he absolutely needed something to keep his motivation high or lift him up from a bad mood, he'd have music, but he would not use it unless it was a last resort because of that.
Yeah. I think because it's like, if you've got a terrible headwind, got something, you're having a bad day, then you've got your music as a backup. So yeah, I think I agree with him on that. And battery wise and all of that, it's kind of, and you kind of want to I like to feel all the elements. So like to be in silence and really take in the surroundings was important to me as well. Because otherwise sometimes I think you can get lost in a song and miss the whole area. Yeah, but a bit of both. I did listen to a lot of music too.
I actually have this as a question, which is a new one that I ask people at the end of the show. But given we're talking about music, I'm going to ask you this now. I am putting together a Seek Travel Ride playlist. It's going to be a compilation of a beautiful mix, I imagine, an eclectic mix, because it's a song picked by each of my guests. Technically, you should be allowed to have 2 songs. Maybe I'll allow that. But if you had to pick a song and it was going to be the soundtrack for this tour, what would that song be for you?
Oh, it's so hard, but I know people love or hate her, but Lizzo was my energy. Like that, put Lizzo on and I was in such a good mood. And I broke my bike twice listening to her. So I think that she just has to be up there, because I was dancing and I broke my rack listening to Lizzo, but the rack carrying my bag.
Can you remember the song?
I think it would have been one of her good Juice or one of those. Well, I'll find the exact one it was. But it was just hilarious, because I was so mad at myself. I was like, why were you dancing? And then I had to laugh, because I was like, come on, but I was on the side of the road with my bags on the floor, rack broken, and I couldn't actually put the bags back on. But it turns out, I always touch wood that there's guardian angels looking over me, because then there was someone that I'd met the day before who was like, oh, there's a bike shop. And I was in near Catherine, up near Darwin. So I'd just done all the remote sections. Like if it had happened a day before, it would have been disastrous. But the day it happened, I was 20k from a town which had a bike shop. So it's just Mum was like, you were so lucky. Like if that had happened a couple of days before. So I have to thank, I just felt like that was complete luck.
As you say, sometimes something's looking out for you. There's like a trail angel always nearby or something like that. I remember, and this sort of goes into the kindness of strangers, which is a constant theme when I speak to people who've done travel like you. But I remember there was a point where you were stationed, I can't remember where it was, sorry, maybe you will, at a campground. There was no water for free. You had to buy all your water. And it was like $48 or something to get all your water. It's like $48 for water, but you can't do without it.
Yeah.
And then someone walked out of the store after you'd paid saying, "Hey, sorry, I just need to pay for your water, thanks," and gave you $50.
Yeah, it was a truck driver, and he'd seen me, like, because I was on that one road. He'd said he'd seen me a couple of times because he was stopping and delivering things. And yeah, he was just like, I can't believe they just charged you $50 for that. And he handed me a $50 note and was just like, I've got daughters. He was like, I think what you're doing's great. And yeah, he was just really sweet, very kind. And that was not that was not rare. That happened all the time. And I just, there's so many good people out there. And yeah, I can't say it enough. Yeah, people, I wouldn't have finished without all the people I met, I don't think. Like it was seriously helped me.
You had other uplifting things too. And I realise it might sound to my listeners that I'm skipping ahead of your trip, but I feel we're going to be doing this a little.
Yes.
This is not a linear journey of your route here. We're going to be talking about instances and things that have happened. But I know that come closer to the end of your trip, you had friends of yours that you had met, I think, from Cambodia.
Yeah.
And they were in their car with their caravan and they were sort of around you for a few days. And that would have been so uplifting.
Yeah, and they came and when I was on the Nullabor. So essentially they live in Perth. I'd met them once. We were volunteering in Cambodia. We used to volunteer at this soup kitchen. So you're all chopping vegetables and you cook. We were cooking about 700 meals and I met Jenny across the table and we stayed Facebook friends and she said, do you mind if we come and join for a few days on the Nullabor? And that they were there when I broke my wrist. So it was just like, again, I've just don't know how. It was great timing and they were amazing, the help they gave me. And yeah, they drove cups of tea and just stopped every 50k and offered me some food. And yeah, it was incredible.
So uplifting. And that's just one instance, like we said. I think you were also making mention the times where you came across other solo female travellers and discovering other people that are on their own different adventures as well.
Yeah, so many. Like the Nullabor was quite a little hive of adventurers, and it made me laugh because they were all British. It was like with the crazy Poms were on the Nullabor all at the same time. There was Tom that was he's walked around the world and he was walking the Nullabor and he had this trailer he was pushing in front of him and obviously he was on my side because if you walk, you're on the other side of the road. And I was like, what is that? I was like, there was something really weird coming towards me. And actually, I was getting quite scared. I was like, I can't make out what this figure is coming towards me. I was like, is it an emu? Is it? Like, I just couldn't think. And it was Tom walking with his trailer. Yeah, and he was and we just chatted. And it was on one of my worst days. And he made my mood so much better for the next 3 hours. You know, it's just who you meet.
It's amazing because we were talking there earlier how you were really thankful that even though you're a social person, it was evident to you that you were quite comfortable being on your own for hours and days. But obviously it is uplifting to have those interactions. I remember during the recording of our first session together, you had mentioned how you'd had an evening in a pub. There were a whole heap of truckies, Australian truck drivers, and they had recommended that you get a radio that you could have communications with. And was it like Truckie Channel 40 or something like that?
Yeah.
So you went ahead and did that. What was that like? And did you manage to get many interactions on the radio?
Yeah. So at the start, loads from kind of Cairns to Darwin, lots of interaction, and it was funny, and it was some really funny stories and lovely words, and people saying, do you need anything over the radio? Can we drop water ahead for you? And, you know, people were really kind on that. And then it got a little bit negative at times. So truck drivers can get quite abusive. So I had to turn it down slightly because, yeah, they were saying things not realising I was on it. Yeah, there was some Australian banter, let's say, that wasn't so kind. So I would always say something back to them because I think it's important. They know that they shouldn't be doing that. So I just like, oh, my mum wouldn't like to hear you say that. And they'd be like, oh, we're so sorry. We didn't realise you were on the radio. And it's like, well, just don't say it, maybe. But essentially, I would really recommend having one in Australia because it was great so that I could just be like, cyclists ahead. Then I know that they've heard it when they're coming behind. If they're in within 5 kilometres of me, they would have heard that there's a cyclist ahead. And for me, that was enough for my safety to at least they knew there was something up ahead.
So then you would have noticed then, was it more evident to you when you were really in isolated sections because there was nothing on Truckie Channel 40? Like there weren't even truck drivers around?
Yeah, and then that did bug me a few times because I would go, hi, is anyone out? Like, and then when you got no response for like 6 hours, it's like, oh, maybe no one is out here. So, but it always made me laugh. Like it would always I would just have it on all day and then I could hear if there were people around. But yeah, I had some amazing interactions on it as well. So it's definitely a handy thing to have out there.
And I'm really glad that you got put onto that as well.
Yeah.
Because also from an emergency point of view as well, did you have like an emergency sort of personal response beacon with you or like a tracker or something?
Yeah, I had a satellite phone, Zolio, which was, I only got like after our first call because my mum and my family were all really panicking. I don't know why. When I got to Cairns, they just had it in their head that this was really like a stupid thing to do, Cairns to Darwin. And I don't know if they'd suddenly spoken to people or maybe they'd Googled it and started to realise that it was quite remote, because before they didn't really been all over the world and they haven't really minded. But mum was like, you have to get a satellite phone. And we had more of a safety chat and things like that. So I had a WhatsApp group that I would either WhatsApp or I'd use my satellite phone to send a message to say I'm safe. And I'd recommend having that.
And when you talk then about WhatsApp groups, I know in discussions with other guests that there's also WhatsApp groups for other touring cyclists as well. So did you get involved in any of those for people maybe cycling in Australia?
I don't think I was in any WhatsApp groups. I definitely got kind of told if there was someone ahead or behind me. Like, it seemed like everyone knew that there was, and the camper vans might say, oh, there's someone coming your way and, you know, the next 50 kilometres. So it was there was quite a good community in that sense. People would tell you, but I don't think there's that many people kind of up. I don't think, not many people go down the middle, let's say. There was lots of hive around the Nullabor and maybe up in Darwin. There was quite a few cyclists, but apart from that, down the middle, I saw maybe one, I think.
I guess then was my thoughts start turning to your wild camping. And I know that you did camp at campgrounds when they were there, but you would have had some wild camps as well.
Yeah, lots. Yeah, lots, yeah.
Forgive me, this is my ignorance here of the area that you've been to because I've not travelled to where you have. But when I'm thinking wild camping, actually, it's something that a recent guest, Helen Dainty, mentioned. She said when she advises people on wild camping, there's two things. You either want to be somewhere where no one knows you're there or everybody knows you're there.
Yeah.
And so then how did you determine your wild camping spots? Were you finding places that were hidden off the road, or did you just get to a stage where I want to be somewhere where people know that I'm here?
Yeah. So I kind of had different ways. Like at the start, I was like, there's lots of rest areas noted on Wikicamps. There's Wikicamps is an app on your phone, and someone will write, there's a gravel pit there that essentially it's for camper vans, so that you could park your camper van there and people leave reviews and they'll say if it's safe. So I started using Wikicamps a lot, but then it kind of got in my head, well, then people know where you are, right? So if you're worried about people, do you want to just be off the road in the bush when no one else is? So I did a mixture, and Telstra reception towers were a good one. So I had to work still every day. So I was trying to balance riding all day, finding a couple of hours signal in the evening to send some emails for work. So it was like there was quite a lot when it came to wild camping that I had to think about. Near the end, I was so exhausted, I would literally just ride until I couldn't anymore and pull off on the side of the road, just find a couple of hedges and go behind the bush. So yeah, by the end of it, I wasn't maybe as concerned as I was at the beginning.
Which is a fair point to make as well, because it was something I wanted to ask you. Does it come with more experience that perhaps the little insecure voice in the back of your mind or the imagination in the back of our mind that might get away from us, does it just quieten off? Or is it just a case that you get to a sense of, I'm so tired, I don't care?
Yeah, I think I just had to say to myself, like, Claire, you've chosen to do this. It's isolated, like there's no one out here. Don't worry about the big scary person that's out. There's not, like you're okay. I just had to keep drilling myself that I was safe and it was fine. And once I kind of got over that fear of being totally alone, like I remember my first night, just pitched my tent, no one around in the middle of the bush. And I was awake for a few hours. I just had to be like, you've got to go to sleep. Like, it's fine. And then after that day, I was much better. Yeah, I think it's just a mindset thing. You just have to keep positive. Nothing's going to happen.
I've mentioned this recently, actually, and it's something that I came across is that, again, people from the show or listeners to the show may already know this, but I especially try to champion the stories of solo female travellers just to highlight that women do these things and we can do these things. But it doesn't mean that we don't have perhaps some extra concerns that maybe from within us or pushed onto us by friends and well-meaning family. But something that I came across, which is true, is that if you're worried about being in your tent on your own, that a stranger's going to see you and thinking oh, there's an easy target, it's more than likely that that stranger isn't thinking that the person inside that tent is a woman.
Yeah.
More likely going to be thinking with their unconscious bias that the person inside that tent is actually a man. And
Yeah.
sometimes you've got to remind yourself that's a point where the way the stereotypes work actually work in our favour.
Yeah.
That's a good one to have in my own personal back pocket.
Yeah. I really think I get looked after more as a solo female cyclist than the male tourers sometimes. I think people really want to look after women, don't they, on the bike? So, or they think, what's she doing alone? I must help her. Whereas I've spoken to guys, I said, do you get stopped a lot? And some of them say, no, not much, because it's kind of both ways, isn't it, to look at. But yeah, no, essentially a positive mindset with the camping. And yeah, I don't think I could do it if I was constantly fearful, because I think I just had to let it go at points. And as I said, the kindness completely outweighs it now. So it's like my 8th trip and I've only had nice things happen. So when I see something, a car pull up, or I'm like, oh, it's someone coming to say hi. It's not someone coming to be awful. So yeah, it's just keeping.
Can you reflect back on a moment where that wasn't your instinct then? Like, did you used to get a little bit, ooh, why is this person stopping? Or
yeah, I reckon in my first few tours, it was always kind of like, oh, watch your back, watch your back, watch your back. Because that's all you hear from other people. Like, oh, people love to scare you and be like, oh, you can't do that alone. So if you're constantly hearing that, it can change your mindset, I guess. So yeah, it's just remaining positive and just believing the best in people.
And overwhelmingly, the best in people shows itself to how many days were you greeted with a trail angel. And even if all they did was stop for a chat, it lifts your mood, it makes your day. I can imagine it would be so uplifting. And you're right, that's what you should be thinking of instinctively now. If someone's there, it's because they're curious, they want to hear your story. Wow, what are you doing in these remote places? What an awesome adventure you are. That's sort of what it's about, isn't it?
People would park up and wait with bottles and food. People would really go out their way. Like I think what I didn't know before is like how many people do the lap in camper vans. Like I didn't know how many travellers there are. So yes, it was as isolated as I thought it would be, but there were more camper vans than I thought there would be as well. So I did feel safe because there was one camper van that was going down the middle that I saw a lot of the time because they had a big kind of painting on their camper van. So I knew it was them. And then we started making friends and I'd see them again down the road. So essentially that might be the only camper van I saw that day, but it was still someone I knew on the road, I guess. So yeah.
They sort of become an acquaintance, a fellow traveller in that way. That's quite cool.
Yeah, for sure.
Before we move off the wild camping sort of talk then, I do want to try and ask, I always say it's an impossible question, especially when you must have found yourself in so many places. But if you were to reflect back on maybe your most amazing wild camping pitch, what was it and what made it so special?
I think it was kind of near the Uluru. It wasn't because Uluru, you're not allowed to camp, obviously, near. You have to be in a campsite there. But kind of on the way there, I just pitched up like in the bush and the stars were just insane. The sunset was incredible. And I was just like, I've got this right. Like I'm doing my life right. This is what I want to remember. And that's the moment that you wish sometimes that you're with someone else to share it. But I was also like, I get to see this. It's all worth it. Yeah, just being in the outback and waking up and the wildlife. And I think I saw camels that day as well. So it was just a good day all around.
What a mega moment. And it's interesting, like I'm thinking of that night sky, which you would have had night after night after night, no doubt. But I'm also then thinking you're talking about the sunset and maybe even the sunrise. And I'm just thinking of those beautiful colours, those striking colours, and whether it's at blue hour before you get that transition of light or whether you've got those beautiful sort of dawn or dusky tones of orangey, light pinks or something.
Yeah. And there was quite a few moments on the ride down the middle that I got overwhelmed by the nature and like that. I was like, this is so... everyone warns you it's so boring, but it's not boring because it's so... Everywhere you look, you could just see the horizon. And yeah, there's something about going down the middle I found incredible. And yes, it's lonely, but to be able to take in all of that was pretty incredible.
And I know, and we'll speak about Uluru because I know you detoured to go there. It meant that you would have extra kilometres to do.
Yeah.
But you went through Alice Springs, and I know that you had mentioned you had been warned by lots of people of Alice Springs not being great. Don't expect much. It's dangerous. It's a bad place to be.
Yeah.
Your experience there was vastly different, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I was a fly-in visit. I was kind of one day in, one day out. But Yeah, I really liked it. And like I said, it kind of for the last 2 months before I got to Alice Springs, people were warning me about Alice Springs and that it wasn't safe to go to. And so it's again those perceptions. And so, yeah, I was a little bit worried going there, but then I was hosted by a family that had lived there all their lives, and they loved it and they couldn't speak more highly of it. And they were sad that it's got this reputation because they know how beautiful it could be as well. So no, I had a great time in Alice Springs and I felt very welcome there. There was a lot of negative views, sadly, going down in the Northern Territory. And I know that's a massive political thing in Australia, but it was a shame to hear when actually all I felt was welcome.
There's some great mountain bike trails around Alice Springs as well, actually.
Yeah, there's lots, yeah.
Were you ever tempted to unload and have a go on the single track?
Yeah, I did. I remember seeing there was a little sign for a mountain bike trail and I do get tempted, but then I remember how much I'm carrying on my back wheel and how I don't want to deal with another broken wheel.
No, exactly. Your trip must have been filled with big milestones. And I say that knowing that when we spoke at first, that your strategy was breaking up the trip into sections. And mentally you could compute it better if instead of looking at a big map, thinking what I've got to do, you broke it down into sections. I'm imagining then, Claire, that you had moments of big milestones. And you talk about your spreadsheet and breaking things up into services, and maybe you got specific in daily details, I'm not sure. But when those big milestones hit, did you ever do anything special to celebrate them, or was it just another, wow, you're doing this? How did those moments come?
The border signs were always a big one, getting into, I think, yeah, definitely the border signs, when you saw them, you're like, wow, ticking off another one. But it was like, wow, this is going so quickly. I remember hitting South Australia and just being like, what? How am I here already? So it was kind of like, yay, but it was also like, no, because that means I'm nearing the end. But yeah, no, I always stopped, took a moment, sat by the signs, really was just tried to take it in. And at the South Australia border, it was really cool because there was a young girl that was on a unicycle, but she was 7 and she was in her family camper van, but she's unicycling over every border. But obviously that she's just going there, stopping with the car, riding her unicycle over. Her mum asked for a picture and we had a picture together. And I said to her, one day you've got to do it on a bike.
That is so brilliant. In fact, I am very, very soon, the next guest that I'm interviewing is actually Becky. I need to do her last, Becky Wiedner. I may have mispronounced her surname. And if I have, Becky, I'm apologising in advance now. And she's a world champion unicyclist. She just finished cycling the European Divide Trail, which is 7,500. It's actually called Mooney, which is mountain unicycling, because it's unicycling on mountain bike trails, pretty much, and off-road trails. She's also the world champion in uphill unicycling. So this is definitely something that people do. It's like uni-packing.
Yeah, I've heard of people doing it, but it was just really cool to see this young girl being so creative. Got a unicycle in the car and yeah, it was really good. It was nice to share that with her.
How brilliant. It's like you said, on the Nullabor, you came across all these poms, but, there were sections where there were less people. And so then, to see something random like a unicycle.
Yeah, just a woman, and I just loved, and she could see a woman doing it, going around on a bike too. And it's just we just need to keep pushing the adventure stuff because, yeah, it's cool for these young women to then want to do it as well.
That's awesome. I love it. We talked briefly there about Uluru, and before we get into the details of there, somewhere else that you visited, which I have been told is absolutely just a stunning mega place, is Litchfield National Park as well.
Yeah, amazing. Loved it. I got really unlucky going into Litchfield. I started seeing smoke. There was a burn going on, and I thought, oh, it's fine. I'll keep going into it, into the fire. And I thought there would be, signs saying planned burn or... Anyway, there was this roaring fire going on for 20 kilometres and not any signs. So I was kind of in for a couple, had done a couple of kilometres of it going, this is getting quite bad. Do I turn around? But then I looked behind me and everything's on fire behind me. So I'm just in these smoke clouds thinking, oh God, I've really pushed this one a bit too far.
Sorry, Mum.
Yeah, so I was like, oh my God, my mum knew what I was doing right now. I'm a terrible asthmatic as well. I don't know if you know that. So I'm on steroid inhalers. So I was like, oh no. And I was covered in black soot. But anyway, yeah, it was roaring. It was so hot. I just remember absolutely sweating. And then this couple went past in the car and they were like, what are you doing? And I was like, I don't know, like, should I carry on or should I go back? They were foreign, so they were like, we think you're okay. So we just had a laugh. They chucked some water over me because I was hot and carried on. And then got to the campsite and I was like, was that a planned burn? Or I never found out if it was, there was no, you'd normally have a sign, right, in Australia saying planned fire burn.
Hazard reduction burns and stuff like that as well.
Yeah.
Like there would be people around too often. And now I know we're talking about vast distances here, so maybe
it was quite an experience, and when I got out of it I was relieved, but I was laughing kind of through it. But it also could have been it was not on the road, it was just the sides of the roads were on fire. But it was an interesting Australian experience, and that was heading into Litchfield. And then that evening I stayed at one of the national park campsites next to the waterfall, could swim, and it was incredible.
Because I've heard amazing things about Litchfield National Park. Everyone says, everyone talks about going up to Kakadu, but Litchfield is where you should really go.
Yeah, Litchfield's really cool. Loads of hiking and lots of waterfalls and campsites right next to them. Yeah, really liked it.
Did you take any time off the bike to do any of those little day tours, like hikes and stuff? I know when you were in Uluru, like you had a camel ride and stuff like that, but when you were in Litchfield, did you get the opportunity to even go for a short hike?
So I went past Litchfield, got to Darwin, and then when I was in Darwin, I had a week off, and I work in experience days out. So my boss very kindly was like, well, book on a tour. So I went back to Litchfield by car with a tour, which was so nice to do it in a car, and got to swim in every swimming hole and do some hiking and learn a bit and have a tour guide that could tell me all these things about nature. And it was awesome because he was telling me, because he knew what I was doing, he then told me lots of tricks of berries I could eat if I had stomach cramp or like things like that. It was really cool. So yes, I tried. I didn't do loads, but when I got to Darwin and things, I tried to do some experiences. And Uluru, I did the camels, and so not as much. Looking back, I wish I slowed down a little bit, but I don't know if I would have finished if I'd slowed down either. So it's a debate that I'll probably always think about. But yeah, I was on a challenge.
I think you've just got to trust yourself that you did the right thing for you at the time as what you needed to do. It's like going forward through the fires. Yeah. The right thing was to keep pushing on and making the next town and deciding where to camp. You did it all safely and you ended your trip. So you have to give yourself credit and back yourself on that. No doubts needed.
Yeah, no doubt.
Uluru then. Let's talk about that. Big, massive geological rock. Is it a monolith? I'm not even sure how we would describe Uluru geologically.
Yeah.
It's mega. What was it like to be there and see it?
I was really, really torn whether to, because you basically, it is straight down. There's one road down the middle, but Uluru is 400k off the main road that I would be on to South Australia. So I was like, do I do this? This is quite a long detour. But then I was like, come on, you're only in, was the main reason I came down the middle. So I decided I would hitchhike one way. So because I would have had to come back on myself, exactly the same road. So basically I met a lovely guy and hitchhiked out there and then cycled back. And I'm so glad I did it because it's a magical, magical place to be. And I rode round Uluru, the bottom of it. There's a walking path and cycling path. It's 10 kilometres long, maybe a bit more. And it's just breathtaking. I did it because I don't mind the heat. I did it at 2:00 in the afternoon. So no other tourist was out because it was too hot. So I was going down the bottom, around the bottom with no one else there. So it was pretty spectacular.
What a month.
Yeah, it's a place that is definitely spiritual. I really felt something going around it and it was magical. I loved it.
The sunsets there and the colours and the changing, the shadows and the silhouettes and how the different light hits that rock structure. How would you describe it?
Yeah. Oh, it's just really, it's much bigger than I thought it was going to be as well. And then the colours, just like you say, they change, and just the red dirt, and it's absolutely iconic. I would love to have seen it before there was the roads and the hotels and things, because it's one of the most famous places in Australia. So of course it's going to become, but you kind of think, oh, what it would have been like with dirt roads going in, and would have been a different story. But I loved it. It was incredible place to go.
Yeah, I'd love to hear and speak to some local Indigenous groups around Uluru as well, and hear, because understanding Indigenous Australians, First Nations people, and hearing about their Dreamtime stories and how Uluru would have had significance for their culture as well. Like you said, it's a spiritual place, and you can imagine what it would be like to them as well. Like you said, there's now a touristy side to it, but a place like that, spiritual is the right word for it, I believe.
Yeah, 100%. And I'm really pleased that you used to be able to walk up it, right? You used to be able to climb on Uluru. Thank goodness they've closed that. I think it's really important for somewhere like that just to be left alone. Like, why do we have to accomplish walking on it? Just let it be.
I was talking about Indigenous people there. Did you have any opportunity to see any Indigenous art, rock paintings or art or anything like that through your travels as well?
Yeah, definitely. In the Northern Territory and going down the middle, there was a lot of Indigenous art, and where were Devil's Marbles I stopped at, and there was a lot of information there. And yeah, I've since coming back, I've been reading a lot about it all, because I felt like on the ride I was quite rushed, and I would have loved to have taken more information in. So since being back, I've read quite a few books about the history, and just I should have done it before, but I owe it to have read a bit more about it. So yeah.
Sometimes though, you don't know what you're going to come across until you're there as well. And again, don't judge yourself. Curiosity has brought you to a place, and now your curious mind has allowed you to find out a bit more and dig a bit deeper, which is also really cool. You've seen places that many people will never see, but you're also the sort of person that will, if we were at a campfire, you'd gladly share stories about it, and you'll tell people, and that will inspire curiosity for others to go and see it too.
Yeah, I hope so. Yeah, I hope so, for sure.
So Indigenous art is one thing. Another thing that features in Australia is big silo art. So we have massive grain silos, and now they've become huge art installations. You would have seen a number of these on your trip too.
Yeah, I got really into, someone told me about them and told me to start looking out for them. So I think I saw maybe 8 in total. There's so many dotted around. I think a lot of them are in Victoria. I think a lot of them are. There's a couple as you go up, and they're kind of dotted around the country. But what a cool thing for people who are road tripping to be able to go and see them all. They're so impressive. You're like, how have you? It's really detailed, and yeah, it's incredible art.
Did you have a favourite of the 8 that you saw?
Oh yeah, it was up past the Brisbane Valley Rail Trail. Just beautiful purple colours. I'll find the name, but it was stunning. Maybe the Three Moons, I think it was called.
Yeah, we talked at the start of the show about isolation and the distances between services. Then you're obviously getting to these isolated services and roadhouses, country pubs, which are very quirky.
Oh, amazing, yeah.
Have their own character.
Yeah. Oh, so many. There's so many quirky pubs and the roadhouses are brilliant because they're like a hub, because everyone stops there. There's nothing else to stop at, so every camper van that goes past that roadhouse in the middle is going to stop. So you've got all sorts of people in there, and then you just add a bicycle in there, and people were just so curious about what I was doing, and I'd end up in long chats, and that's where I got my socializing, I guess, was at these pubs and things. But yeah, there's some incredible countryside pubs as well that let you camp for free in the back, and there's always someone that wants to have a yarn or a chat. And yeah, I love that way of living out in the countryside. It was cool. I could have stayed a while at some of those pubs.
Just the quirkiness and the characters who must operate them as well.
Yeah, so there was one, I'm trying to think of the name, but the Drovers Camp, that was it. Okay, got it. So basically I was in a really tiny town, and there was nowhere to camp, but I found this, it said Drovers Camp. So I was like, that looks like a campsite, I'll just rock up. But I didn't know what the Drovers were. So I got there and I say, is it okay if I camp? And she was like, we're not a campsite, but why not? And she essentially it was a Drovers museum. So they had all the memorabilia. They had a huge warehouse full of, it was a museum about the Drovers, which for people that don't know, are basically, it's moving of the cattle, right? So it's all the farmers that moved the cattle around Australia. So I just ended up in this situation where I camped at the museum actually for 2 nights because I had a planned rest day. The owner had said she had to go away the next day, and could I manage the museum tickets? So I got to stay a couple of nights, and I worked in the museum with this incredible man called Stumpy Adams, who was a drover back in the day. So he was in his 70s, and no one ended up coming to the museum. So Stumpy just led a 2-hour tour just for me and showed me around the museum and told me all of his history. And it was so cool. It was one of those experiences. It was just incredible to get that, to meet someone like Stumpy who had done such incredible travels in Australia. It was crazy. It was cool.
and meeting characters like that at isolated places is one thing, but I'm also thinking when you finally get to, say, a roadhouse or wherever, it's your resupply point. And I realise we've spoken about food already, but food is a big deal for Bella, especially on a cycle tour. What are you most craving? What was the one typical, we talked about an Aussie burger with a lot, but what would you typically just look forward to so much when you get to a country pub?
Ginger beer. Ginger beer.
Oh, yes! Bundaberg. Good old Bundaberg ginger beer.
So good. I'm missing it, actually. Really missing it. It was just like the one thing that, you know, when you're that thirsty, like you're just thirsty for a cold drink. Normally it'd be a Coke for me, but Bundaberg completely topped a Coca-Cola for me by the end of the trip. Yeah.
Do you know what, Claire? Here in the French Pyrenees, where I live, there are two supermarkets which actually sell Australian Bundaberg ginger beer.
Okay, I need to come over.
I know. It's funny. There's another Aussie that we know who lives close to us as well. And I remember when I found it and I was like, oh my gosh, there's ginger beer here. And he goes, yeah, I know. And I said, sorry, I didn't want to sell them out. And he goes, no, you need to keep buying it because I want them to know that it's popular and I keep restocking it.
I love that. It's delicious. Yeah, that was, and the glass bottles, something about a glass bottle. It was just great.
Love a ginger beer. I'm here waiting for you to say, you know, bacon chips or bangers and mash or something.
It's ginger beer by the end of it as well. Chocolate milk was a big thing for me.
Like oak or something like that?
Yeah, your cartons of chocolate milk were great, and they're not too big, so I could have one. Yeah, that was, by the end of it, quite a big thing for me if they had that stocked.
Proper sports nutrition too, though. Chocolate milk, no joke, is fantastic recovery.
I've said that to so many people, and they're like, no, it's not. I was like, it's so good for you. You can drink as much as you want.
It is. It is. Own it. Factual. Chocolate milk for the win. Chocolate, and that's why you could keep going day after day.
Exactly.
Because when we talk about keep going, there's a physical side, but my goodness, Claire, I cannot even fathom the mental battles that you would have had on this trip because Mother Nature, we talked about floods at the start and we've hinted about the hot weather.
Yeah.
There's headwinds and there's headwinds.
No, it just felt,
Can you describe them? Up to the point where we had spoken for the first episode, up to Atherton, I'm sure you would have had days of a headwind.
Not really,
Or they would pale into insignificance into what you faced, if I'm correct.
Yeah. I just didn't see it coming. I knew it was kind of like, okay, it's going to be one bad day. And then it was like, no, there's a week of gale force winds. But then I was like so determined to keep riding. And I hadn't, like, in my stupid spreadsheet, you know, that for me, I was so hell-bent on getting to Perth on a certain date. But I know if I hadn't have done that, I would have stopped with the winds because they were that bad. So it was like, no, there's no choice. You have to keep going. But Bella, like, I couldn't walk in some days. Like, I couldn't walk against it. It was gale force. Like, I'd looked at the speeds and things, and it was saying like gale force today. And I was like, do I go for it? I was like, I guess I have to give it a go. So yeah, it was, and then mentally I was just screaming. I was just shouting and screaming and singing and telling, you know, I must have looked absolute bonkers because it was just like, I can't do this.
The sky was the colour blue with the language that I would have been shouting at the wind if I was there. And you probably wouldn't even hear your own voice. I know what it's like. I have had the experience here in France. I did a cycle tour from where we were at the other side of the Pyrenees over to Marseille, but there was a day where we headed up from the Camargue and we headed north up to Avignon, which looks really, really beautiful through Provence, except the Mistral was blowing and it was January, so it was bitterly cold, minus whatever in the morning, frigid, freezing. But the Mistral, I think, would rival the Nullabor winds. Yeah. It is horrendous. Yeah. And I think it was sort of wind speeds of around 80 kilometres gusts.
Yeah.
And you cannot pedal forward.
No, you can't. And
you're stuck at the side of the road. Even standing still, you nearly get blown over.
Yeah. And that would be bad enough when there's people around. So then add like that there's no one around. There was one day I was like, I was ready to call it quits and put my thumb up, but I was like, there's no one here. There's no one to put my thumb up to. So that was when I was like, it was just, I had to, I don't know how I did. I remember there was one call I made to Mum and I was like, I don't know if I can carry on. She was like, you can. And luckily that was the day I found like a sweet shop and they had loads and I just bought so many sweets. And then I was like, right, I can do this. And then I remembered to have fun. I was so stressed out. I was really grumpy. And then I found the sweet shop and I was like, sweet. And I was like, this is supposed to be fun, Claire. Come on. Like, you can handle this. Like, you can get there. So it was kind of switching the narrative, because I was definitely close to becoming too negative and moaning, where it's like, come on, you've decided to do this. You've got to make it fun however you can.
Well, sweets, or lollies as we call them in Australia, is the way to do it. I actually remember your Instagram story. I remember messaging you. I'd seen this transpire. It was like the headwinds were brutal, and at one story you're like shouting to the wind. It was like, why are you doing this to me? It's almost like that meme of man shakes fist at cloud. It's Claire. Ah! I remember then the next story is like, found a sweet shop, and I was like, yes, this is the way.
Yeah.
Get 2 bags.
I did.
And then you're like, I'm on it.
I went back and back, I think. I got 3. I went back 3 times because I was refusing to start. And I kept going back to the sweet lady and being like, I was kind of asking her to tell me what to do. Like, I was going, do you think I should carry on? Do you think I should stay here a night? And then she was like, I don't know, love. And then I just would get more sweets to try and get an answer. And then I made the decision to carry on. But yeah, my friends definitely at that point, because I was doing quite some funny Instagrams. They were like, you've lost the plot. But I wanted to show people it's part of the fun, I guess.
I'm trying to even remember the sweets that you bought. And I'm trying to think, if I was in your situation, what would I look to get? I'm thinking sort of like, we would call them chocolate freckles. Yeah. I don't know what you would call them. Is that what they're called in the UK? Freckles?
The multicoloured freckle ones, yeah.
Yeah, with like hundreds and thousands, like little multicoloured.
Yeah. I got lots of those.
Yeah, what was your go-to?
Chocolate raisins, for sure. I think I got lots of those. Strawberry laces. Yeah, a bit of everything. It was a weird mix.
As long as you get a banana in there, I mean, you've got an invariable fruit salad in the...
Exactly. That day I was talking to someone at the sweet shop, actually, and he had said he was driving and he didn't want to drive in the wind, so he'd push back his trip. I was like, great. So that's when I realised, because then you question, is it you? It's like, is it that bad, or are you just feeling tired? And then when he said that, I was like, no, this is quite bad wind. Like, normal people wouldn't do this. Do you know what I mean? You kind of go, oh, maybe I've just done it for too many days now.
Yeah, it's not normal. And actually, if I reflect back again to that time I was talking about with my tour in the Mistral, the French wind, headwind to Avignon, I remember we had stopped at a boulangerie, of course, to get like a French pastry. And I remember getting like a local specialty, which is one of their biscuits, or biscuits, Saint-Gilles, I think it was. It was beautiful. It was a sable biscuit, which is like a butter biscuit with like lots of different jam and stuff. And I remember the lady at the bakery was like, bon courage, and she was talking about the vent. And so I'm like, well, if she's thinking that it's pretty bad and she's not even cycling, I should have bought 3 of those. I didn't. I should have gone back 3 times and asked her for advice as well. So the wind is one thing, and like you said, you just had to remind yourself, be positive, have fun, remind yourself why you're doing it. What about the heat then? Because the heat is no joke, and heat stroke is no joke. Pushing yourself to the limit in that type of weather, what was your strategies for that? And did you adopt a different cycling routine for the heat of the day?
Yeah, the heat kind of stopped after Darwin. I think that's quite interesting to note, because I didn't realise that. So up until Darwin, it was boiling, and I had my crazy hat. It's called a de brim that goes around your hat. And that was really good for shade, really good, like helped me. There was a couple of days crossing over to Darwin. It's called the Barclay Highway, and it's very barren, like not many trees. And I was just desperate for more shade. And I just remember really, really nearly getting heat stroke. And yeah, those were the days you're just craving a bit of shade. But yeah, I guess lots of water intake was the most important, and just listening to your body. When I kind of knew when I had hit a near heat stroke level. That sounds really bad, but I kind of knew when I was at my worst, and then I'd stop and completely have some food, have some water, have some comfort, and then get back on the bike, because you can't push it too far in those. It's too dangerous to get overheated.
Did you find then that, would you try and set off earlier in the day, or stop for a few hours in the middle of the day, continue in the evening, or what, was there a pattern to the heat? Like, was there a point where I can cycle to this time and then I have to be off the bike?
Yeah, that's true, actually. Yeah. So I would kind of always get up around 4 a.m. I'd always kind of be on the bike around 5 to 6. And then the heat of the day, I always found was about 2 to 3 o'clock was the worst. So yeah, if I could, I would stop then and sit by a tree or sit wherever I could and have an hour off, and then do the last bit of effort in the afternoon. And as I mentioned, some days I had to work, so I might do an hour of work in the heat of the day if there was somewhere I could stop. So yeah, I just tried to adapt to the heat, and it was difficult, but you make it work.
And then I guess if we stick on the theme of weather, because you had the other extreme as well, where you had days where it was lashing with rain.
Yeah, rain, and it was pretty cold. So from Darwin, when I told people I was going down the middle, they were like, "You're going to need jumpers, blanket. The nights are going to be pretty cold." And I thought, no, they'll be fine. Actually, I didn't have I would say I needed a few more warm clothes. Like I needed more long trousers and things like that. I was still wearing shorts in quite cold weather, and the nights were pretty bitter. So yeah, but a lovely family. They gave me a blanket halfway down, like a really thin blanket I could carry, and people were just amazing. Someone gave me a jacket, and someone gave me a down jacket because I had got a good rain jacket, but that wasn't warm enough. And she was like, "We've got a spare one. Here you go." I was like, "You're amazing."
Tell someone you're cycling through the desert, a lot of people think, well, that's going to be really hot. And your instincts don't turn, especially to the evenings.
Yeah.
Where it chills right off. Did you hit minus temperatures there overnight as well?
-2 overnight.
It's cold. Sinks in your bones.
Yeah, it was cold. And then I just remember like really struggling to wake up in the mornings and get out in the cold weather. Like I was like, no, I don't need to get up. I was like, no, you have to get up because you've got a long day. So I'm packing the tent up in the rain. That's any cyclist will know. Packing a wet tent up is just so annoying because you know that night you're getting back into a wet tent.
Oh gosh. And your tent only just really barely survived this trip, really, didn't it?
The tent was a joke. I don't know why I didn't invest a little bit more money in a good tent, but there you go. You live and learn.
It got you there. I guess if someone says, would this basic tent do it? You can say, well, it'll do it, but...
I should leave them a review on Anaconda, actually, and say it got round the whole of Australia.
If you decide to go back to the Kimberley, you should say, hey, Anaconda, I'm hitting you up now. Give me what you got. I'll give it a great review. Actually, speaking of things which wore out, I must actually say one of the questions here is about the durability of ASICS footwear, because your shoes, your trainers, what a state they are in.
Oh, they were awful. I love ASICS. I've got a new pair on now, actually.
The right size, obviously.
The right size. They're £40, so that's not for a good pair of running shoes to get around all of Australia. I was pretty happy with that. They were great until one of the soles came. You know, it was like that classic, you pull the sole down.
It's
and
like an open mouth. Open. Yeah. 100-mile-an-hour tape, some gaffer tape around the edge to keep it going.
Lots of tape. But then when it started raining, my feet were going wet. And but there's nothing you can do on you're not. I did order shoes, obviously, which is a funny story. I ordered shoes ahead to a post office. So for 2 weeks, I was excited. I was like, I'm going to get a new pair of shoes on this date. Got to the post office, they were shut, and I went, oh no, and it was a Saturday, but I just called a number and they came and opened it for me. So I was like, oh my luck. And then I opened the box and I thought I had ordered a UK 8, but I'd ordered a US 8, which is 2 sizes too small. So then I went the next day, I was like, whoever I see tomorrow, the first person I see tomorrow, I'm going to offer them my shoes, my new ones, because I didn't want to carry them around. Yeah, and I met a guy at a petrol station and handed them over. We had a chat, and I said, do you have anyone? They were pink soles, and he was like, I'm not going to wear them, but my daughter might. So,
pay it forward.
Yeah, good story.
I could just imagine you're rocking these awesome trainers held together by gaffer tape.
Yeah.
You've gone through the struggle of getting the post office open when it's closed. Your heart just must have dropped to the floor. You're seeing
it was disheartening, but I laughed a lot. It did make me laugh because it's just one of those classic things that you're trying to be organised, and I was probably deliriously tired when I ordered them, and yeah, I had to laugh. I sent my family and they went, only you would do that. So
we were talking milestones earlier, Claire, and we were talking about state borders and stuff. Another milestone must have been when you saw the sea again after going through the centre and hitting the edge of Australia again down there in the south. What was that like?
Yeah, that was cool. I was like, oh wow, okay. That's where Australia's incredible because it's all so different. So going back to that, I was like, oh, okay, that's more like the East Coast. It was incredible to see the ocean again. And then you do the Nullabor where you've got the best of the bite cliffs and these incredible cliffs. And there sadly weren't any whales at the time, but there was potential that there'd be whales out there. And it was a very cool thing to get out of the desert and be like, oh, okay, there's the sea. I love the ocean and things as well, so it was a big thing.
Did it smell? Like, did you have that salt smell in the air as well?
Yeah, actually, that's true. I did. Yeah, good. Yeah. At the time, I probably didn't think about it, but yeah, I can look back and see that.
I always used to get really excited about that whenever we went to the coast back in Australia, was like, roll down the windows and breathe in the salt smell of the sea air. It's just something. And it's hit me that I've been over, I don't live too far from the Atlantic. I'm 2 hours from the coast here, and the Atlantic Ocean is amazing and the waves are amazing, but it doesn't seem to have the same salt air. So I don't know, maybe that's an Australiana thing, not sure.
It is.
The Nullabor, that would have been quite something. Obviously, you did the 100-mile straight, the longest road, the longest, deadest, flattest, straightest road, no bends, no twists or turns. It's probably safe to say, though, you would have encountered a fair bit of dead, flat, straight roads even before this. How did you deal with a monotonous landscape in that way?
Yeah, I think actually like the scent of Australia really helped me cope with the Nullabor, because the Nullabor, everyone had been warning me that the Nullabor was this really extreme, isolated, quiet, barren place, but actually it was busier than the middle. You've got so many people crossing the Nullabor, it's a big thing for camper vans to do, and yeah, I felt like there was much more going on for me at the Nullabor. It didn't bother me in the slightest, really, the straight roads. Again, it was just that I was dealing with a lot more, other things going on. I think it was my second day on the Nullabor, I fell and broke my wrist. So fractured my wrist, it turns out. That was like, well, I've got the whole Nullabor to do now with one hand. It was quite extreme.
And that was as a result of the road trains from the other side of the road, weren't they?
Yeah.
What happened to you? How did you crash?
I would say the Nullabor, the shoulder on the Nullabor is pretty horrendous for cyclists. It's very tight, and it basically essentially goes into like deep, loose gravel. So you've got the road or you've got deep, loose gravel. So, and a cyclist had warned me about that section where I fell. He had fallen as well. So it was definitely a spot where you need to be careful. So yeah, essentially 2 big road trains. I was 5 minutes from finishing the end of the day. The couple that were driving with me that day they were down the road. They had seen me, so they were waving. They saw the whole fall. So basically 2 big road trains came, and when the road trains come on the other side, they smack you with this wind. Like it's like honestly, it's like it's physically quite a lot to take. And then so when there was 2, I knew it was going to be an extra big shove on me. So I was like, I'll get off and I'll stay still. But I didn't time it well enough, and I had kind of started to come off, and the second wind of the road train I just shoved me off, and I put my hands out. And at the time I was just embarrassed. I didn't think it was anything wrong at the time. I was like, oh, that's sore. Like I've scratched it up. And then the middle of the night at 2 a.m., my hand was throbbing, and I was like, oh no, I've done something wrong. And I got up at 5 a.m. before the other people were awake, and I'd left and I couldn't grip my hand. I couldn't grip my handlebar. So yeah, I knew I was in a bit of a pickle, but I didn't kind of want to, when you're with other people and sometimes people can make it a big deal. And I was like, it's not a big deal. I can carry on. So I was being stubborn, essentially. I carried on with it, and a couple of days later, there was an outback doctor who took one look at it, and she actually said it was broken. She was like, that bruising really shows a break, but I was like, I need an x-ray. But there wasn't a hospital for 9 days, so I just was like, she strapped it up for me, put a plastic splint in there, and we just carried on.
There's been times where, and I know I've done it myself on some really long rides, or I've had guests who talked about it, where sometimes you just, in the moment, things are tough and you're sort of gritting, wondering how you're going to get to the end. And sometimes you're almost wishing for like a bike-ending mechanical to take the decision away from you.
Yeah.
Listening to you recount that story now, I can hear that I don't want this to stop me. I want to get to the end. Was there ever a point, and maybe not even with your wrist, but with something else during the trip, where you just wanted the decision to be taken away from you? Like, did you ever wish for the trip to be over?
That's a hard one. Not with the wrist. The wrist didn't bother me. I don't know why. Like, I knew it was painful, but I was too far. Like, I'm finishing this. So I could mentally overcome the pain of my hand. Like, it really did hurt to grip and things, but I had my other hand. So I I would ride like this and like one-handed a lot of it. And yeah, I kind of made it work with the hand. No, the other time was actually that sweet shop day was the day I think I was close to quitting. So that's the only time, I reckon. And that was quite quick, you know, when like you have like an hour or two of that complete doubt, and then I calmed down. It's just, yeah, it was, but no, the wrist was okay. It kind of made me, in a weird sense, it made me more motivated to finish. Like, I've got to get.
How many days were you from the finish then? Like you were 9 days from an X-ray, but how far were you from Perth?
3 weeks maybe, because I still had all the Mundabidi to do.
It's amazing. We've got to put it into context, because for a lot of people, 3 weeks is a massive tour.
Yeah,
for some people, just a long weekend is a massive tour.
Yeah.
It's only 3 weeks, far out.
I know.
I know we don't want to talk about distances, but how long did this whole trip from Tassie to Perth sort of, like, how many months did this trip actually take?
So I started in late November. I think about 7 months, 6.5, 7 months.
Wow.
50. I think it's roughly 14 to 15,000 kilometers.
Wow.
Yeah. So it was, but the East Coast I took it quite easy going up the East Coast. I'd have days off, and then I panicked because I had my friend's wedding, and I decided I was going to try to do it all before my friend's wedding. And that's when I was kind of Darwin coming down going, I worked all the kilometers out, and I was like, you have to. I knew if I'd followed my itinerary that I would get there for the wedding. It was an added pressure, but as you say, I had to own it. I had to kind of go, this is the way I'm going to do it. Yeah, but I think I took like maybe 3 months to do the East Coast, even more, 4 months to do the East Coast. The middle and the Nullabor was quite quick in comparison. So yeah, it was all a bit crazy.
But I wonder also if, and maybe like you said, you'd set yourself a finishing date, like you had a flight to catch, you had a wedding to go to. But I wonder if also it speaks to the fact that there's not much in between. And I know I'm not talking a landscape, I'm talking about town. So there's not many opportunities to stay.
Yeah.
It's not like you could stop 10 kilometres earlier at the town before, or constantly day after day and have warm shower host after warm shower host, or a reason to sort of go off the beaten path for it more.
There would be days where if you did stop and have a rest day, then you'd just be sat in the bush, like with your tent. So it's not like you would stop and do anything that day anyway. So even though I was tired and probably could have had a rest day, it's like, what would I do on that rest day? I'd just sit in the middle of nowhere. So yeah, essentially that helped me keep going.
Now, before coming into Perth, you hit the Mundabidi Trail. That was sort of how you finished up. And from what I saw and what I've heard previously, this looks like a trail that I need to ride. What was it like being on the Mundabidi?
Yeah, it was a last-minute decision from me. I'd met a warm showers host outside of the trail, and he was like, you've got to at least do a day of it. And he was completely inspiring anyway. So he was one of those people you meet, you're really in awe of. So I was like, if he's telling me to do it, I'm going to go do it. And yeah, it was incredible. Just, hardcore, like again, my setup wasn't right for it. I was pushing my bike a lot of it because it was really off trail, muddy. Oh, it was just crazy. It was a crazy trail, but fun, beautiful. Yeah, I loved it. I wish I could go back and do the whole thing. I will hopefully one day go back and do the Mundabidi, the full thing.
Because I'm trying to actually think even how long the whole thing is. I know it's multiple days.
I think it's over 600k, I think.
And it's all off-road.
All off-road, and there's this amazing app. So sometimes like I would go to a bit and it would just be too hard for my loaded bike. But then I could go hop back on the road but see where the trail... So I could always... The phone app was amazing. It was $10 and you could constantly hop on and off if you wanted. And yeah, it was a really, really awesome trail, and there was walk-in huts. So one night I stayed in the walk-in hut, and that was free of charge, and there was a fire in the corner of it was a really cool place to stay that evening, and they've done it amazingly for cyclists. People must do it. It's incredible.
And what a way to sort of bring your trip sort of to a close, because it wasn't long after the Mundabidi that you're then coming into Perth.
Yeah.
That must be such... I don't even want to put words into what it must feel like. What did it feel like to get to Perth? Like, Australia completed it, mate. I've seen the stories on your Insta, but what did it actually feel like?
I think for me it was just a relief of like, wow, like I've done this. Like, yeah, massive relief. It feels surreal. It doesn't feel like, I say this, like, especially being home, it feels surreal that it was me. Like, I'm like, that wasn't me. Like, that was someone else. I'm not brave enough to do that. But then you have to be like, you did do it, mate. So yeah, no, it's just a level of surrealness. Yeah, but loved every minute of it. Like, obviously it was hard, but really enjoyed it. And yeah, just getting to Perth was, a relief for my family. And yeah, it was just an incredible feeling. But one of those, you're like, oh, it's done. And then I didn't know what to do. Like, I still had a week left in Perth with friends, but it was very chilled. So when I woke up, I was like, what do I do? Like, it was lovely to relax, but I was really itching, like, I need to do something.
Yeah, and we were mentioning before we pressed record on this show today, like you were saying you're finding you've got so many hours in the day there. Like, you are in the UK at the moment, but are you still waking up at 4? I hope not.
No, I'm not. I do. Yeah, no, I think it's I want to talk about this because I think it's, you do these big challenges and you come back and no one really talks about the aftermath. Like, the aftermath's just as big of a challenge as a challenge, because you get back and you have to learn to cope with post-challenge life as well. Like, life isn't one big cycle around Australia. Like, you have to come home and sit with all of that and reflect. And so, yeah, I've got loads of time on my hands, and it's just using it positively and resting, but also, just reflecting on an epic challenge. And I always think about what the next challenge is, but it's trying to sit with it and, really reflect on that trip as well.
Because it is a really important point to bring up there, because it's also a well-known thing that it's sort of like post-challenge blues. Mentally, it can be a real downer for a lot of people. What you have focused so much effort on, it doesn't even have to be a cycle to it. It can be even finishing a PhD, a degree, any major life event that you've put full focus on. When it comes to an end, that completion leaves an emptiness in a way. It's sort of like something you've attached to your identity to for so long has stopped.
Yeah.
Have you dealt with, have you noticed there's been like any low emotional moods there? Or it seems like you're really aware that could be something, like you're cognizant of it. It's like,
yeah, I'm super aware of it because I've been on the road for nearly 6 years now. So, but like on and off. So every time I come back, I know I dip a little bit. I'm a bit like, oh, what am I going to do? And life gets, it gets a bit overwhelming. So I know I've got I know my ways to cope when I get back from a trip now. But no, 100%. You think, like, I was so determined of what I had to do every day, and now to not have that, it's really difficult. But you just have to enjoy the little things. Like, I've got incredible friends here, family. So it's just enjoying those things and getting ready for the next big challenge. I think, yeah.
Yeah, which is up and coming for you. Like, do you want to give a little insight into what you're sort of thinking and planning?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So I bought the ticket last week because I was just getting myself into it. I know I was getting a bit of a tizzy, and I was like, just book it. Like, then you'll feel better. Then you've got. So yeah, I'm going to Bangkok on the 3rd of November, Thailand, with the bikes coming with me. And then, I'm aiming to basically, eventually I want to ride home from Asia to London somehow. It's logistically a nightmare with visas and what's open at the moment, what's not. Instead of like worrying about that, like, I don't want Australia, I had to be quite like, with the itinerary and stuff. The next trip, I want to slow down and really take in all of it. So I'm not going to say like I've got a year to do it. I'm going to say, if I want to do it in 3 years, cool. If I want to do it, and just have it a bit of a slower pace, Asia to London, through Mongolia, all of their stands, and into Europe.
Wow. And is it sort of something as a continuous trip, or are you open to the idea of coming back for sections and then picking up where you've left off in a way?
Yeah, I am open to it. Yeah, as I think we mentioned, I've got my sister's getting married next year. So there's always things that are going to be bringing me back and forth. And I need to that's life. And I want to be there for those big moments in my friends and family's lives. So yeah, I'm going to, if I can get back for these things, I will. It doesn't have to be a one set trip. I just love exploring by bike. So it's just like, why there's no rush for it. If I can keep working online and doing this, why not keep going?
I'm going to have to keep tabs with you, Claire, and find out when you're back in Europe next year and get you down to the Pyrenees and host you for some mountain sessions. So before you set off for the next stage and you need some time to fill up the hours in your day, I'm putting it out there, open invite. I don't have a campfire, but I do have beautiful mountain views.
The rides that you've been posting, they look phenomenal, Bella. Like, it looks insane.
The thing that I love the most is that even after being here, it still makes my mouth go, wow. The best thing I've done recently, and it's a little bit of a tangent, this is not my story, this is a podcast about you, but the thing that I've done recently, and I would definitely recommend it to anyone, is I've changed the cassette on the back of my bike, or my gravel bike, which I also cycle commute with, but it's my go everywhere bike. I love it because it means that if the road surface changes, I'm on a bike that's ready for it. I've got 43 mil tyres on it, and I've got a big climbing cassette on there, which means that when because the steep roads in the Pyrenees happen quickly, but it also means now I can be curious enough to go, oh, I wonder where that little road goes.
Yeah, awesome.
And I can just discover things. So even though I've not necessarily been on mammoth tours, I can find that I'm having little mini adventures in my day.
Yeah.
To me, that's a way of dealing with post-trip blues as well, is filling up that sort of thirst. I've spoken about it on the show before. I'm a passionate outdoor lover. I'm a passionate photographer. And being able to allow myself a few hours to go and fill up and replenish my soul with that passion has been so important to avoid those post-blues.
Yeah. I think that's something I want to learn, like when I come back or finally settle, to be able to have a balanced mixture of it. Is, like you say, do what you love and feel it, having a couple of hours a day to do it is so important.
Oh, it is. All right, so I'll book you for 5 days here. That's cool. Sorted. We'll have like podcast number 3.
Yeah, exactly.
You'll be a co-host before you know it.
Love it.
Look, I realise that we've been gassing for ages here, and I'm so thankful you've given me so much of your time, and I promise I'm going to wrap it up. There is a question that I definitely do want to ask, though, and it is, I feel like, you're mentioning 6 or 7 years on the road now, so many touring experiences and stuff. People are going to be listening to your story, Claire, and there's going to be someone thinking, oh, and that curiosity, hey, I can give this a go. If someone was interested in giving a similar route to you, to the one that you took through remote Australia ago, what sort of bit of advice or tip would you give them from, reflecting back on your experience there?
Oh, yeah, that's a hard one. Just embrace the time alone. Like, don't feel lonely. Like, it's a chance for you to really get to know yourself and know what your limits are. I think it's pretty incredible to fully understand yourself in those moments. I had months to really get to know myself and my mindset and what makes me pissed off or what makes me happy in the day. And yeah, just I think being able to sit with yourself is really cool, and splitting up my trip into segments was one of the best things I did with mentally. It is a big place, but don't think about it as this huge thing. Do it in little bits and you'll get there if you just keep going. Yeah.
It's sage advice regardless of what you're doing, whether you're on a cycle tour or not. Breaking things up into sizable chunks mentally helps you figure out that you can complete something. Being comfortable with you and finding more out about yourself helps you be comfortable with, the trajectory of where you're going as well. So I think it's a sage wisdom. I know you have particularly taken inspiration from fellow female travellers and pioneers like the like of Dervla Murphy. And I know I've said this to you before, but I fully 100% believe it. I feel like you are a modern day Dervla. I know that you've made a start, and I hope that you'll continue with writing your own books.
Yeah, I'm 100 pages in actually at the moment, but I'm hitting a wall, and you just
it'll flow.
It's finding that creative side of me to get it all down, but I will.
Like your future trip, you don't need to pressure it. You don't need to put a deadline on it.
Exactly.
The good stuff will flow. The memories and experiences are within you.
Yeah, exactly. Very true.
All right. Well, I am going to wrap it up. And before I do so, if people will want to follow you, and I'll post a link to your socials in our show notes, your Instagram account is
Exploring by Bicycle. Yeah.
So Exploring by Bicycle, and I'll post a link to that in the show notes. When Claire does eventually publish her book, I will obviously be updating that with a link to her book. I wonder what to call that. Oh,
I know. I've actually given it to so I went to dinner with my granddad the other day, and I've asked him to think of the name, and together, because he's a big traveller and he followed my trip really closely, and I've said to him, the title's on you, Granddad. So obviously. That
reminds me, because he was the reason you started. You've got a blog as well.
Yeah. That is because he reads it in the morning, yeah.
Oh, I love it. And if your granddad listens to this show, hello, Claire's granddad.
He will.
Okay, Claire, You know the next two questions. I've already asked them to you before, but I feel that being on a trip like this, there's a chance for them to have either solidified to the same response or to maybe even have flipped. So I'm going to ask them again. Feel like I definitely know the answer to the first one. But if you have to choose between cycling up a constant climb or into a constant headwind, which one are you going to choose?
Climb, absolutely. And I think I said that last time, didn't I?
Definitely.
Yeah.
The wind battering you didn't change things.
No, absolutely. Never want to wind again.
We must shout out, you did have a few days of tailwinds though, right?
I did. Yeah, only like 2, but yeah, I did.
Oh, magic. Okay, and the next one then, like we've talked about you being comfortable in your own company, but if you had just 4 hours to ride one day and you could do it 4 hours on your own or 4 hours with other people, what do you think you'd choose?
God, I don't know. I know last time I said with people, but now I'm probably on my own. I'm so used to being on my own now. No, I'd still pick my favourite people and go for a 4-hour ride for sure.
Knowing that you, being you, would probably go for a 4-hour ride straight off the bat on your own anyway afterwards.
Yeah, exactly. Nailed it.
That is totally fine and totally the right answer. It's the right answer for you. Claire Wyatt, it has been an absolute pleasure. It has been such a joy to just catch up again, to hear about some more of your experiences and just know that how much this journey has impacted, changed you, and also the learnings from it, what you're going to be taking forward. I love that you've come back home to the UK with a mindset to continue travelling, that you want to connect that world map and fill the dots all the way back home.
But I still want to sit on a bike is interesting. But I'm still willing to keep pedaling.
Before you know it, you'll wake up one day and the bike will just be an extension of you. It's a connection to you. I think you'd be lost without it. You might be comfortable in your own company, but you probably wouldn't be comfortable without a bicycle.
No, I'm not sure. I don't think I would.
Well, anyway, Claire, it has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you once again for sharing the rest of your journey with Seek Travel Ride.
Thank you, Bella. Thank you so much.
Being able to catch up there with Claire and hear how the rest of her tour went has been an absolute joy. It was really clear to me just how much it took to get through that next part of her trip, that route through Australia that she took. She was definitely not taking the path well trodden, definitely through many isolated areas. But it sounds like she had it within herself all the time to be able to lift herself up, keep herself going. When something so severe as breaking your wrist doesn't stop you from getting to the end, it really gives you an insight into how Claire's mindset operates there. And it's so evidently clear to me that cycle touring and adventuring by bike, this form of slow travel, will be with Claire forevermore. And I thank her so much for being a favourite guest here on Seek Travel Ride. Now, if you have your own bicycle adventure that you would like to share with our global audience, then please definitely reach out and get in touch. You can contact me by email. My email address is podcast@seektravelride.com. Get in touch, let me know about your bike adventure, and we can chat about how you too can be a guest for the show. If you're enjoying the show, make sure to subscribe and follow the show on your podcast player so that you are notified when new episodes drop each week. And of course, if you feel so inclined, please feel free to leave me a rating and review and let me know which of the episodes so far have been your favourite and why. Until the next episode, my name's Bella Malloy. Thanks for listening.